On September 30th, 1955, a silver Porsche races down Highway 466. James Dean is at the wheel. He has just finished shooting his third film, Giant, 2 days before. He's 24 years old. At 5:59 p.m., a Ford crashes into his Porsche at the intersection of Route 41, and a legend is born. But let's go back 24 hours before the tragedy.
The day before he left on his trip, we saw him because we hooked up the trailer onto the station wagon that was going to take the car to Salinas. After I finished customizing it, painted the spears in the back, put a little bastard on the rear thing, and then put the numbers and everything.
George Barry paints the number 130 on the hood and the doors of the silver Porsche. James is delighted with the results. He then meets up with some musicians to play bongos. Later, he sees his best friend, William Best.
My father was friends with James Dean, 1955, where my father was with a jazz musician called Bob Romeo on flute, and my father was a bongo player. He played bongos with James Dean. And James Dean, after he would get off the movie set, he would go up to Sunset Boulevard and watch my father and Bob Romeo play music, and then James Dean would get up on stage and sit in with my father and Bob Romeo on flute.
The night before he died, he wanted to talk to me about working on a screenplay, and he wanted to do a modern, contemporary Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I thought that was a very suitable subject for him because he had such a schizophrenic personality, so changeable.
It was really hard for him to make friends with people. So, from what my father's told me, that if he was in a room full of musicians, he would act like a musician. If he was in a room full of people getting drunk, he would act like he was drunk. He would adapt to any situation.
It's true that James Dean had few friends. Only a handful understand the anguish of this rebel without a cause. Obsessed with death, he once told Best that he would be dead before the age of 30.
He said, I'm going to have dinner with Sandy and Beulah Roth tonight. And I said, fine. I was going to go down to the kendo matches in Little Tokyo in downtown LA, which is Japanese sport. We said, I'd like to see that. So Sandy said, well, I'd like to photograph that.
And Jimmy was fascinated by it. So the master, the fencing master, in costume, and it was very, Jimmy asked if he could enroll in the class. He wanted to study kendo. And the man he didn't know who Jimmy was. In fact, nobody knew who Jimmy was.
In fact, when he died, only one of his films had been released, East of Eden. Jimmy is still a famous unknown. The next morning, he wakes up at 7:20 and calls his friend Jeanette Milez to ask for news about his cat, Marcus, which Elizabeth Taylor had given him during the shooting of Giant. He then calls the photographer Sandy Roth before leaving Sutton Street to get his Porsche tuned up.
At 8 o'clock in the morning, or before that, the phone rang, and I answered, and Jimmy said, well, are you coming? Are you all coming, including Louie? I want you all there. They had a station wagon following. I said, Sandy's going, but I'm going to have to stay home. I made some excuse.
Around 10 a.m., he arrives at the garage with his friend, Bill Hickman.
We saw him before he left when he was getting off with Hickman and Sandy Roth. They were off to the gasoline station, and the car was on the trailer. Of course, from there on, he took the car off the trailer and wanted to drive it.
At 1:30 in the afternoon, James Dean gets in the Porsche with mechanic Ralph Wenterlich. Photographer Sandy Roth and his friend Bill Hickman follow in a van as they head to Salinas. Roth is going to take pictures of James Dean during the race. Dean takes his mechanic's hand and makes a victory sign. The convoy heads down Cahuenga to the freeway. Jimmy is dressed in his usual uniform, white t-shirt, faded jeans, and a red jacket.
He liked cars very much, so we always, on the set, we'd talk about different cars and things like that, and he was getting into racing and into that variation, so we kind of followed each other around while he went into his racing days. With his short amount of time that he was driving and his experience he was getting, he could be and could have been one of the top racers of the circuit today.
Around 3 p.m., they stop for a snack at Tips at the exit to Newhall. They're soon joined by Sandy Roth and Bill Hickman.
It's a long trip up north where they were going. It used to take to San Francisco from here 400 miles. Took about 12 hours. But they had stopped for lunch and they had stopped for drink, maybe.
15 minutes later, they're back on the road. Dean speeds on ahead in the stretch through Kern County. He has only 2 hours left to live.
That he had had the impact on people to make them want to invent incredible tales about him. He made them want to make him more important. It was amazing. And they did. They supplied everything. They were, in themselves, the best public relations machine I have ever seen.
Several days before his death, James Dean had agreed to do an ad for highway safety.
Miles an hour, clocked at around about 106, 7.
You've won a few races, haven't you?
Oh, 1 or 2.
Where?
Well, I showed pretty good at Palm Springs. I ran at Bakersfield. People say racing is dangerous, but I'll take my chances on the track any day than on a highway. Well, Gig, I think I'd better take off.
Oh, wait a minute, Jimmy. One more question. Do you have any special advice for the young people who drive?
Take it easy driving. The life you might save might be mine.
Just before 4 p.m., State Trooper Audie Hunter stops the Porsche for speeding and gives Dean a ticket. This will be his last autograph. Dean continues in the direction of Paso Robles. At the same moment, Donald Turnspeed, a 23-year-old student, arrives in his Ford at the intersection of Highway 466 and Route 41.
James Dean was coming westbound down the hill. Turnipseed was eastbound, making a left turn onto Highway 41. They both approached the intersection and reached it at the same time. Turnipseed not seeing Dean, and they hit with terrific impact right at the intersection. After the cars collided, the Turnipseed car just spun around once or twice and stayed right in the intersection, and a Dean vehicle spun off and came to rest over here on the shoulder. Dean was in the vehicle. He did not get thrown out. The mechanic was thrown out of the car beyond where the car landed.
In spite of the state of the Porsche and the Ford, his friends still contest the police report that he was speeding at the time of the accident.
Jimmy did what a professional or a craftsmanship racing man would do. He would try to maneuver around that automobile, not with braking, but with force and power in your engine.
So the high speed, the death wish, all of these things are absolutely ridiculous.
He was not going fast.
At 6:30 p.m., Roth takes photographs. Paul Moreno puts James Dean and his companion in an ambulance.
At about 6:15, my phone rang. It was my husband. He said, something terrible just happened. He said, now what you have to do you've got to first call Warner Brothers. And you've got to speak to George Stevens. He's probably in the projection room looking at the last rushes. Because until the picture is finished, an actor can't do anything like Jimmy did. You know, there are contracts, they can't do it. Is he still up there? And I told him, and that's all I heard. I heard silence on the other end. He must have dropped the telephone.
The ambulance races through the night toward War Memorial Hospital in Paso Robles. It is hit by a car on the way.
He was declared dead on arrival at the hospital. So either he was dead immediately at the accident scene, or else he died en route.
James Dean's father arrives at the hospital at dawn with a suit for his son. He requests that his T-shirt, jacket, and jeans be destroyed so that no one will try to steal them. Sculptor Kenneth Kendall, who had been commissioned by James Dean to do a bust, began the statue after having heard the news of his death.
After I heard the news, I went out and I bought a newspaper, and I came home and I sat down and I cried for half an hour for someone that I had known for about 45 minutes maybe, but had made that much of an impression. And Elizabeth Taylor said in one of the interviews, and I'll go along with that, she said, if James Dean walked into your life, nothing would ever be the same again. That's certainly the way it's been.
He was a young man in the first place. It's very hard for people to remember that Jimmy was only 24 when he died.
She's a folk hero.
In 1960, I sent the car to a show in Florida. The car was with the police department. They loaded it on the truck. The truck was then sent out here with the car. The car disappeared.
Before the car disappeared, for 50 cents, you could take a look at the remains.
Someone had introduced him to us, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's Le Petit Prince. And this became his Bible.
The day after James Dean's death, his Sutton Street apartment was burglarized. The thieves stole his bongos and his 16mm camera. No movie stars attended his funeral. Liz Taylor sent flowers. As James Dean said, "No one has ever done anything for me, and I don't owe anyone anything." The man who personified teenage rebellion had become a legend at the age of 24.